Welcome everybody to our session today, and with a change of speaker, because there's been a change in plan, and how incredible and lucky are we that Sharon and Tracy were able to step in at really late notice to come and talk to us about peer advocacy and in mental health sessions. And it's such an important topic. As we can tell by the amount of interest, we've got lots of people joining today. A couple of housekeeping things. If I can ask people to respectfully put themselves on mute, unless you want to ask a question, which is perfectly fine, please do. I asked Sharon whether she wanted an informal meeting style, and she said no. Yes, we are not formal folk, was the response. So I think questions are welcomed. You can also use the chat box, and please do. Don't feel that you have to if it's distracting. And yeah, I shall. Oh, and we are going to record the session as well for people who can't join live. So Sharon, Tracy, welcome.
Thank you ever so much, Kate. And hello and welcome everybody. I'm Sharon. As Kate said, I work with Vital Project, which is up in the north. Not quite as far as Scotland, so it's still part of England, as it were, for now. Unless I move to Scotland and the border moves down or something like that, I don't mind either way. Peer advocacy. We're here just for a very short time, but we've got some exciting sort of interactive software that we want you to engage with us on the presentation with. So if, can everybody see my screen? I'm going to go with yes, because I can't see everybody's faces.
Yeah.
So that's me. And we've got a little link here. If people have got a secondary device that they can log on to, in addition to the Zoom meeting, it's https www.menti.com, and that will give you the opportunity to engage live with what we're presenting you. So you can choose multiple choice questions for ask live questions as we go along. So I will give people just a couple of minutes to either log on with a separate device or log on with the device that you've currently got open and scroll between windows. Finally, if you don't have the ability to log on or the wherewithal, because we're all working with different levels of IT experience, just feel free to stay as you are and I'll share the screen. It just means you won't be able to interact with the slides that ask for interaction, but that's not a problem.
It's important to say as well that when you go through to the Mentimeter website, if you're going through, to add the code that's at the top of the page. So it'll take you through to our presentation, which is the 12552199. That makes sense.
So let's see whether or not we've actually got anyone joining us on Mentimeter. So hopefully on your screens now. Yep, we've definitely got somebody.
Yay!
There we go. And this is the beauty of live and interaction, live and interactive presentations in the 21st century. How far have we come? So I'll give everybody a chance to cast a vote there if they want to, before we go on to the presentation for real. And so far, I think the kittens have it.
Oh no! Oh.
So yeah, live voting on screen. Oh, puppies. Ooh, right. I think I'm going to call that as. I've got feedback at this end, but I'm going to call that as a kitten win. And we will move on. It's only just a kitten win. There were a bit of playing around there at the last minute. So, does anybody have at this point any questions about what they would like to get from the presentation?
Sorry, Sharon, I've just put you on mute. Apologies, I was trying to.
It's all right. If anybody's got anything that they want to make sure that we cover in the presentation, any learning outcomes in particular that you'd like to achieve from the workshop that we're doing today, feel free to sort of post a question on here, or if you're still just in Zoom, post a question on the Zoom chat, and I'm looking now, there are some questions. No, that's from Kate to everybody. Tracy, could you keep an eye on the Zoom chat just in case any questions come up that way? I
can do that.
Give everybody a little minute to see whether or not anything wants to be posted up on the Mentimeter.
What do you want? Okay.
So in that case, we'll just take it as general. We've got no timetable for the presentation, I should say. We are last minute, and it is short notice. But if there's any bits that feel as though we ought to hover around them for a little bit longer, we can do that. Any bits that don't feel relevant, we can skip by and hopefully address and engage with the conversational aspect at the end of the presentation. So, you know, no questions are silly questions.
There's just one come through saying the slides that are showing are a bit mangled. I don't know if it's just me. Is everybody else okay or looking fine here?
Let me show.
I can see them fine.
Let me swap sharing screens. I've got one dodgy screen and one good screen.
Oh, you've got your emails up. I think it's generally fine, Sharon. I think it's. Oh, the joy of technology.
Is that better for anybody?
No.
No?
Hello.
No.
Hello. Hello.
Hi.
It's Colin here. I'm getting too much sensory overload here with being autistic. There's too much going on here, and it's going to cause me meltdown.
Right, Colin, do you want to just stay on the Zoom chat and forget any other interaction? Will that work better for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, just stay on the Zoom chat and I'll share the screen. Can everybody still see my screen?
No, it's gone to it's just gone to Google, to Bing, Microsoft Bing, so you come out of the presentation. Yeah, you're back in.
I'm back in. Apologies, everybody. So yeah, Colin, just stay on Zoom and I'll share the screen with Zoom. And if there's anything that you want to contribute, rather than doing it on any other platforms or any other aspects of the apps, feel free to put it either in the chat or just share it verbally. There's no problem with that. So, I think the first question to start with is what do people understand by peer advocacy? And this is one of those that we're going to ask you to vote on. Someone's in there pretty fast already. So, you know, is it advocacy just for the nobility? Is it dukes and other members of the peerage? We all know that they really struggle to be heard, and they're really vulnerable in terms of how they access and use services. So they really do need support. Is it advocacy with the addition of lived experience, so that the people who are providing the advocacy have got their own experience of having used the services that people are using? Or is it advocacy a more watchful approach? You know, we've had watching brief in the past with non-instructed advocacy. You know, is this version of advocacy a more watchful, so we go into all of the nooks and crannies of people's lives and be really observant about what they need? Most of you have, as you can see, gone for advocacy with the addition of lived experience, which is sort of quite heartwarming and really nice to see. So I'll move on to the next screen. So, Vital, we are a service user-led organisation. We were set up in 1989 by a group of patients who were on the inpatient psychiatric unit in Bradford called Linfield Mount. And it became apparent that they had nobody independent to speak to. Nobody was supporting them outside of the medical team who were treating them. And, you know, still to this day, we have a lot of nurses that say they advocate for their patients, but there's a duty of care and there's a conflict of interest. So they can't really be independent in the same way as an independent advocate. And people wanted to know that their voices were being heard. So patients started supporting patients in the very early days to have their voices heard. And, you know, it's always easy for window cleaners to clean other people's windows. You know, we're much better at helping sort out things for other people than we are at sorting things out for ourselves. So the benefits of having someone support us are without question. So people wanted to have an understanding about how the services knew they felt. And at this time, advocacy was new. And, you know, I think what most of us are aware of is this is the origin of advocacy. This, you know, advocacy didn't start with the independent mental health advocacy under the Mental Health Act in whatever year it came in. It didn't start with Care Act advocacy. Advocacy started with the people that use the services supporting other people that use the services. So feel free, anyone at any point in time, to add anything in. I'm no expert. I'm certainly not here to preach, and I'm hoping that, you know, by the end of this workshop, I will actually take something away that I didn't know from one of you. So, you know, feel free to add your comments and questions and queries as we go along. So for Vital, peer support is where the advocate has a similar or shared experience to the person that providing a service to. It's being equal with the person that you're supporting as their peer. And for this presentation, we're looking at peer advocacy within mental health, but obviously we recognise that there is other forms of peer advocacy within other forms of service provision and forums. So some of the benefits of peer advocacy, and it'd be good to get people's thoughts and comments in the chat on this if you've got anything that you feel that you've got that you'd like to add and contribute. So we feel that people using the service are more able to share their experience with us, and sometimes, you know, find themselves in places that they wouldn't want to explain to somebody who hadn't already been in a similar situation. So yeah, it can be difficult to know that it's okay to share when somebody's using services. You know, there's a lot of transparency about the way that we work with people and helping them to navigate difficult pathways. But also it's an empowering thing to know that when you're in the depths of a mental health crisis, that the person supporting you has recovered from that process as well. So it can be quite an inspirational thing for people using the services to have an understanding of. I think we were able to provide a better understanding and a little bit more empathy, and people have a much more confident understanding that they're less likely to be judged. And I think
just a quick question: are the peer advocates paid or volunteers at your service?
Our peer advocates are paid. They're professionals, and I'll come on to that in a little bit more, and we'll give you a case example of somebody that started with our service and is now a paid advocate.
Heather says, good to hear.
So also, I think within the organisation, there's a lot of co-support. So mental health is on the table. I had a conversation with somebody who's a paid advocate the other day about how they're struggling to get access to their psychiatrist and their GP practice, and having issues with medication. So it's a very honest and open, transparent place to work. And, you know, sometimes it can be a little bit like a bubble because you forget that it's not the same everywhere else. And, you know, when, excuse me 1 second, I'm going to have to cough. I've had this bug going on. When we have people that come and join us in the staff team, one of the things that we have is a very mental health friendly embedded recruitment process. So at the application point, we ask about people's experiences of mental health and what their understanding is, and that has been the first time that people have felt that they could be open about their experience of mental health in the workplace and know that it wasn't going to be used to judge them and, you know, address capabilities somewhere down the road. So, you know, there's quite a lot of benefits, but I think the benefits for us as individuals and providers are very good in that there is a lot of co-support. So that's really quite good. There are additional considerations, I think, within peer advocacy. One of those being boundaries. So, for instance, I'm currently just under my GP practice, and my GP gets to hear about my mental health, and when it's not good, I go to my GP for support. So for me, one of the boundaries is that I will not provide advocacy support for somebody who's using the same GP practice as me. Other advocates, for similar reasons, will have their own boundaries as to what they will and won't do. And that takes a bit of practice to work out what it is, because it's not until something comes up that you know that it's not comfortable. And if it's not comfortable, it's because it's not a healthy boundary generally. So, you know, there's a lot of development and reflection as we go along as advocates in a user-led organisation. There's also the recognition that everybody is an individual. And my experience of something will be different to somebody else's experience of something. The circumstances around what makes me make a particular decision will be different for somebody else. So we have to be very clear with people that, you know, we're not there to guide, to coach, to advise. We're not the experts in their life. They are still the experts in their own situation, and they are their own best decision makers. And then there's that little bit about managing our own mental health. And as I said, it's a very open, transparent place to work. And I think there's more understanding, and, you know, mental health is a part of everybody's agenda. It's just not often that people feel they can be open and honest about it. So, you know, within an organisation, one of my closest working colleagues for many years was paranoid schizophrenic. So he worked in the forensics advocacy provision setting, and he would regularly have people challenge him, say, oh, you don't know what it's like to be in secure services. Yes, I do. You don't know what it's like to be locked up. Yes, I do. You don't know what it's, yes, and it'd eventually get to the point where the challenge had become a little bit, you don't know what it's like to be a woman in a men's prison, do you? Well, no, you've got me there. So, you know, you can leave yourself open to challenge, but most often than not, we manage those challenges in the same way that we manage the expectations in any service that we provide. And again, being careful not to give extra advice from our own perspective. So, you know, my experience of certain drugs might not be somebody else's experience of certain drugs. You know, we are all unique, we're all individual, and we do not ever experience everything in the same way. So it's making sure that we're clear with the people that we work with about that position. So the question, are our advocates paid or unpaid? We are a paid professional advocacy service with funding. We do all the same things that all of the other advocacy services do. So our advocates have undergone the independent advocacy qualification. We have the QPM, we have policies, we have practice, we have support, we have supervision, we have a trustee board. We do everything that everybody else does. But we do it with the additionality of being a service user-led organisation. So, you know, our QPM extract, as you can see there, Vital Project is a small advocacy provider with firm roots in the communities it serves. The staff team are cohesive, mutually supportive and well-led. Advocates are knowledgeable, well-informed and passionate about ensuring their voices, the voices of those they serve. The service's real strengths come from the fact that it is a strongly user-led organisation. As well as providing advocacy services, there is a strong commitment to supporting and developing self-advocacy skills in those they serve. So, yeah, we are an organisation that provides to a professional standard. We're an organisation that was pre-professional standard, and we've grown and we've developed with the sector and the standards as they've developed, and we'll continue to do so. I'll just have a little minute now while I work out my notes and see whether or not I've got everything. Yeah, a form of myself. I did make a note. One of the things that we have tried to do as an organisation is make sure that we are out there as a part of the wider advocacy sector, the advocacy networks, because there aren't that many service user-led organisations that can be at the moment. And I had a remembrance that once, many years ago, I was in the trusteeship of Action for Advocacy, and I had sign off on the final edit of the parliamentary briefing on advocacy that brought about was a precursor to Independent and Mental Health Act advocacy, and was mentioned in the Queen's speech. So yeah, we do try, and as an organisation, be involved in influencing. But we're small. We're working to capacity, and we're working to the resources that we have. But anytime anybody wants us or we can support in any way, I'll make sure that you've all got our contact details at the end, and we're always happy to hear from people. So Rebecca is one of our paid advocates. She's a professional advocate. Rebecca started working with us several years ago when she was in inpatient care for her mental ill health. So she basically had a diagnosis of agoraphobia, anxiety and depression, and we worked with her as an advocacy service to give her access to being heard, and to help with the areas that she needed support with. And Rebecca's own words are that if it hadn't been for the help, that she would still be incredibly ill with no support or worse. The journey from service user to advocate. Rebecca wanted to give something back, and today she's not only delivering community advocacy, but also supporting volunteers to deliver the service. And she cannot stress how much this kind of advocacy is needed, how the support is saving lives and keeping people in the community with vital support. So we've got there a link to our website where the full story from Rebecca can be found. But, we really are banging the drum for service user-led mental health advocacy. And that's not to say it's the only form of advocacy that there should be. But it's a form of advocacy that we appreciate and people that we work with appreciate. So I'm almost at the end of the sort of formal presentation, and it's gone a lot faster than I thought it would. So I'm really hoping that we can maybe get on camera face to face and have some facilitated discussion. So if anyone's got any questions at this point that you'd like us to address in the discussion, please type something up now or put it in the chat, and then we can make sure that we cover those things. Or you could just pipe up and ask. I'm all for open discussions.
Sharon.
Yeah.
Colin.
Hiya,
Sharon,
Colin.
I've been involved basically ever since basically national advocacy, since I was involved in various organisations, all in each mental action group. My concern is that peer advocacy basically has disappeared because a lot of disabled people's organisations have been shut down in the last 20 years. And I think it's a big concern, but I don't know Mervyn Gorin from Nottingham.
Yeah, name's familiar.
Yeah, Mervyn basically has been involved for many years. I mean, I was involved basically Wellness and Recovery Network with Peer Advocacy. I don't know Peer Advocacy in Cullerton. We all trained up basically as peer advocates, basically Wellness and Recovery practitioners. But I think it's all just fell apart because to get funding for advocacy organisations is very, very difficult.
But I actually think, Colin, that the form of advocacy we providing is coming back. I mean, it's the origins of where advocacy came from, but also so many people don't have a statutory entitlement to statutory advocacy services. So we have people that come to us that have got no other access to getting advocacy support because they fall through the net. And we're getting this more and more. I don't know about other people and what their experiences are of people sort of not being entitled to statutory advocacy.
Have you heard of UCAN, Sharon? UCAN, what UCAN? What
Yeah.
I was involved in UCAN many years ago, but UCAN disappeared. It just disappeared, UCAN.
UCAN was, again, part of the origin story. UCAN was sort of like a precursor to what was Action for Advocacy and the work that's going on today with the conference. But, you know, when I say the origin was user-led, UCAN was user-led, and a lot of the earlier stuff was user-led. And, you know, I'm not saying that advocacy standards aren't needed, because they are needed. But what they've acted to do is organisations with very limited access to resources, very limited people involved, haven't been able to develop and grow with the changes as and when they've come along, which is a real shame. It's almost where we're at now with digital exclusion and, you know, everything happening with a hybrid world and happening online. If you haven't got access to online, or like you, Colin, you know, it can be sensory overload. It's really, really difficult. So yeah, UCAN was fantastic, and they were a significant precursor to where the advocacy sector is today.
I mean, it's not in Wikipedia, don't mention UCAN for the issue about doing.
It does. Kate does, yeah. Kate's got a history. I don't know if that page you've got, Kate, that shows the history of advocacy, and where it came from and what happened at the various stages in its life, and that does mention UCAN. So there is recognition within the sector.
Have you heard of the Ulster Friday Mental Health Action Group? Did you ever have any contact with us?
Yeah, I supported quite a few people. So without mentioning names, Vital supported quite a few people to be involved, and there were a few people from Vital back in the early days that were part of UCAN.
Yeah.
And I think I've still got a UCAN code of conduct somewhere as well. I hang on to these things. A bit of it.
Mervin's got all the data. Mervin's got all the UCAN. Mervin's got all the data from UCAN. So if you ever want the data from all the stuff from UCAN, he's got it all basically.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I haven't got that much time to put to being a historian, as much as I like it.
Yeah.
Any other questions from anybody?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of questions on the chat. So Catherine has asked how we are funded.
Oh, we get a mixture of funding. So we've got some local authority funding. We've got some health funding. What else have we got? We get snippets of money here and there when we put in for funding bids. And yeah, it's a vegetable soup type of funding. You throw everything at it, and we're just missing the meat, which is the big win. So we sort of get through the week, but we're very cash flat. So, you know, we're in a risky position, but, you know, vegetable soup, and hopefully if we get a good win, we might upgrade to, you know, Heinz or something.
It's a question from Fiona. She says, I'd like to set up a peer support on CAMS ward. How do you get around confidentiality with children?
You effectively would have to work to the CAMS policies if you're working on a CAMS ward, which is what we do with the trust. So we provide an advocacy service within the forensic setting in Bradford, and that part of that contract is that we work with the trust. But there's quite a lot of sort of peer support for children and the development of peer support going on at the moment. So it's possibly worth reaching out and seeing what's happening already in other areas. In terms of confidentiality, you have to explain within your peer support group that there are certain things that you can and can't maintain confidentiality. So safeguarding, harm to self, harm to others, all of those things you have to put on the table and kind of go, this is where we're at. If these things come up, we will have to breach confidentiality, because you've got to work in people's sort of best interest, duty of care in terms of safeguarding. In terms of confidentiality, you could set up your own group, you know, what will be maintained as confidence. and what won't be maintained as confidence. I suppose it depends on how many people you've got in the group, how tightly you need to facilitate those group working relationships. I would suggest that you don't facilitate a peer support group as an individual. I would suggest that there's always a second person in there that can be a point of reference. I don't know if that answers the question or if there's anything more to it.
Next one is, how did you and your colleagues find advocacy support from an IMHA, and how can we improve our approach?
Oh, I think be there with the person as much as possible. Don't constantly refer to the IMHA guidelines and legal, this is what an IMHA must do, this is what an IMHA must not do. If there's a way of being able to help something, whether you're an IMHA and you've got guidelines or not, just try and do that as an advocate rather than being restricted by the IMHA or IMCA or even Care Act regulations. So yeah, it's just being aware of you're working with people, you're not working with a reference book. But most IMHAs I know are absolutely fantastic anyway, and wouldn't do anything that was unhelpful.
Okay, there's loads of questions coming through on the chat. There's also one come through on the screen.
We'll do the ones that come through on the chat first, and then I'll move on to this one.
Okay, that's fine. Do the peer advocates act as IMHAs?
Yes, we have IMHAs.
Okay, how would you practically go about setting up an advocacy group within a setting? Is there any particular guidance that can be used to support the process and help settings understand and support this?
It depends on the setting. I think basically it depends on if you manage to get good key relationships with the people that can influence the setting and decision makers in the setting, there isn't guidance as such, but I'd be happy to have dialogue with people that wanted to do something and see if there's any way that we as an organisation could support that. But it's getting a buy-in from the setting and working out what the benefits for the setting are going to be. So in terms of peer support, it's for them it's generally going to be free, certainly to start with. They've got nothing to lose. What they'd need to do is give you maybe access to a room where people could come in. If it was an inpatient psychiatric setting, obviously the restrictions are somewhat different within that setting. So, it's working out whether there's capacity and resource for that to be taking place within the setting.
Okay. How was your experience of working on a mental health ward during lockdown?
I haven't had personal experience of working on a mental health ward during lockdown. The lockdown has been significant, though, in terms of we weren't able to be present as an organisation. So we were doing things like Zoom calls, telephone calls, and certainly for us as advocacy providers, that really didn't work. And the person that we had providing advocacy on the wards at that time was at risk. So one, they had to isolate. Two, the ward didn't want them anywhere near. And it wasn't until we got the second jabs that we could really go back in and sort of get to grips properly. So we tried all sorts of other things, like trying to set up a peer support group, but the ward really weren't interested. They wanted us on the ward, and until we were on the ward, there wasn't a great deal that they wanted else to happen. So it has been difficult. And in terms of how we've been able to work as an organisation, we've still had email, we've had phone, we've had people contacting us via the website, we've had the social media, but it's not the same as the face-to-face. And I think advocacy is one of those services that is reliant on face-to-face work. So it has been difficult. And we're still doing some virtual work. So we do complaints advocacy. And a lot of the complaints meetings are done over Zoom with recording. So, we're not out of COVID measures, we're out of lockdown, but we're certainly not out of COVID measures. And, it's working out how we move forward to do the best that we can with what we've got.
Next question is your organisation national or regional?
We're local. We're not as big as regional. We try and get involved with things that are happening within the sector at a regional and national level, but we're small fish.
How do you support advocates with their own mental health?
Tea time and tissues generally. What's works best. It's having those open conversations. We have regular supervision, and we have lots of informal support. So we do the formal stuff, but we're also there for the informal stuff. So we've got a fairly good open door policy. I'm going to cough again. Excuse me. Where have I gone to mute? We've got a fairly informal, loose infrastructure that is very supportive. We're not a large organisation, so we've got a team of 10 working with the organisation, and then we've got the trustees. So it helps that we mainly get on, and when we have differences, we're able to confront and work out a way forward. So we are small, and that helps. We know one another. There's no sort of lines of hierarchy or HR departments, or we work together, and support comes naturally as part of that process. Sometimes you can miss something and you kind of go, hang on, if I miss, is everything all right? But being open, being transparent, and giving a damn.
Next one is the way we the way we have grown Peer Advocacy is through our volunteer community advocacy team. We are always trying to find funding to pay people. At the moment, it's really hard to get funding for this non-statutory advocacy. We are pushing for this, and our commissioners too. Any tips on how and where we can look would be appreciated.
Tracy?
Yeah, I mean, I deal with the funding at Vital, and it is hard at the moment. I think it's just a case of looking. We've got all the grants that are coming through. We just keep on top of the ones that are coming through and getting as many applications as possible. I am more than happy to speak to you directly if you want to get in touch with me through the website. If I can think of any more tips, I can't think of many tips at the moment. It's just that hard slog really of looking, but I'm quite happy to send some ideas your way if you want to get in touch with me via the website.
Thank you.
That help? Okay. Oh.
Can I just read there with it? It's Colin again. I think the problem with funding this, I mean, we've got some funding for the advocacy project, but then the funding only lasted for a year, basically, and that's the problem with going to Comic Relief or the national lottery basically funding, because they only give funding for a year, and it takes a year just to get a year or two to get the project get it going.
There are some out there that do like multiple years. We've got some funding that's come through recently for a 3-year period, so you get the funding every year for 3 years, which has been really useful for us to kind of like build the projects. So it's just trying to identify those types of funding if you've got a specific project that you're working on.
About co-production then, about the do co-production basically part of that funding as well. Yeah.
I missed that. Sorry, say again.
Co-production basically, when you fund it, because it has to be if you get funding off a local authority, basically it has to be co-produced, basically designed, delivered, and basically overseen, basically.
Yeah, it's a funny one, is that though, Colin, isn't it? Because we are the ones that we would co-produce with.
Yeah.
So yeah, we often struggle with co-production for that reason. What we try and do is bring in people that are fresh out of having used service, or bring in people that are stakeholders for other reasons. So yeah, we do try and work with stakeholders, but co-production for us as a user-led organisation is always going to be a bit strange.
Yeah. It's how you evaluate co-production as well.
Yeah. And I think, we as an organisation being user-led, we we recruit people that are service users. We don't co-produce with them. We are just a user-led organisation, and that's where we come from, and that's what we hope to put forward as something that people want to fund. I think we had something the other week when we put together some information for Advocacy Awareness Week, and we put in user-led, and we were told by the people that we put the information together for that we don't use that now, and we don't use service users. And you kind of come back and go, well, if we can't define what we are even, then who should be defining us? It's a bit of a funny situation.
The last question, sorry. The last question that I've got, oh, actually, no, I've got a couple. Where are we? It's a funding question again, but it's about, obviously, how did you manage to get funding when I'm assuming you were going up against large company bids?
We don't always, quite often the resources that we have at our elbow do not match the resources that other larger organisations, service providers have at their elbows. So, we do what we can when we can, and with a view to the fact that there's always going to be someone come in and undercut us or say they can do it better. And, that's the nature of the market that we're in, unfortunately. We work well with some aspects of local commissioning. We don't work as well with other aspects of local commissioning. We work well with the trust. The trust is better understanding of the need for advocacy for their service than the local authority is. But the local authority are the ones that have the decision-making skills with regard to where the funding goes. So it's the world that we're in, and we are where we are. So sometimes we lose, sometimes we win, but we're fortunate that we can carry on going and keep doing what we're doing in the meantime.
Couple more coming through. Keep going. There's a point raised, what's wrong with user-led? Genuine question. And the next one is, what types of qualifications are out there for independent advocacy?
The main one's the national, which is the independent advocacy qualification, which various providers do, and Kate being one of those providers. Another provider being Carers Federation, and that basically is made up of modules to get you to the independent advocacy qualification level. There's lots of informal stuff. So we do work with volunteers. It's around sort of recruiting service users, building on confidence, building on self-esteem. So we've got a training program that's in-house to us that gives people a chance to reflect on their experience of mental ill health and how they can bring that to a positive resolution by supporting people through providing volunteer advocacy. The formal stuff is out there, but there's still a lot of informal stuff as well. So, if you wanted to do the IAQ, you'd have to be employed as an advocate, and it would be a requirement to undertake that within 6 months. So to do the IAQ, there needs to be an organisation that's resourced, that can support you, and all of those things. It's not something that a volunteer peer can just jump into doing, but there are other training sorts.
That's the end of the questions on Zoom, so it's just the one that's coming. Yeah.
How do you as an advocacy employer establish if and when a prospective advocate is too close to the issue? That thing about boundaries, and when something doesn't feel comfortable, there's a reason. We're very good at boundaries. And we have an advocate who currently works with us who lost a partner to a very debilitating illness, but he wasn't believed and she wasn't believed by the medical services. She recently started advocating for somebody who has an illness and who isn't being believed by medical services. She knew that this was very, very close to her, and it was bringing up all sorts of personal things. And we had a conversation, and it was an honest conversation. It was an open conversation, and it was like, well, you as an advocate have got a duty to this. It's about what this person wants. So when they were writing up notes, it was like there was a bit of opinion in there, and like, we have to bring it back to the person. What did they say? Not your opinion. So yeah, it's a process, and it's a learning process, because until you're in a position where you experience that for the first time, you're not going to know what it's like. And you know, sometimes it can be helpful to share experience once you've had the opportunity to reflect on it, so that it's not about your experience, it's about how your experience can support somebody else. For instance, you know, I have experience of going into therapy, and I know that part of that journey can be shared with somebody, not my experience of therapy, but my experience of the journey. And it's working it out as you go along, and being aware of the boundaries. If something doesn't feel right, then there's a reason for it. We just need to work out what it is. But having a very open and reflective approach to our experience, and being very aware of what is our experience.
This is coming through from Jo. She said, any details of training for volunteers would be great, as we are predominantly working with volunteers. We also want to expand our work with people with disabilities, and finding the right training can be challenging. Yeah.
I mean, I think Rebecca, that I shared the case study with you earlier, would be happy to have a chat about training for volunteers, because Rebecca's got quite a lot of experience of working with volunteers who are people that have used our services and used mental health services. If that's going to be of any help, she's great. So yeah, I'd be happy for Rebecca to have a conversation with you on that.
Yes, please. I'll take down that email address and send that through to Rebecca.
Fabulous.
Sharon, Colin, how do you deal with safeguarding issues?
Same as everybody else, but we're not risk averse. I think we're less risk averse. So I know certain organisations that if you tell them you've had a paracetamol, will be straight putting in a safeguarding alert. And that's not about caring for you. That's about them being risk averse. So, you know, if somebody tells us that they've had a paracetamol, it's like, oh, have you had a headache? It's a reasonable sort of thing to do if you've had a headache. But if someone comes in and tells us that they're intending to kill their care coordinator, and explain to us that they've got a knife, and when they've killed their care coordinator, that they're going to kill themselves, that's an issue that's a 999er. You know, we will work with the person still. We will talk them through the process. We will explain the situation that we have, and help them manage the expectations going forward. So yeah, we've had occasions where...
How about challenging psychiatrists under psychiatry, the use of psychiatry, basically psychiatrist power and control under Section 42 of the Care Act of safeguarding. So a lot of psychiatry basically do a lot of damage, and I've damaged, when I've got experience with that, was damaged basically by psychiatric drugs. And I've had complaints from Section 42 because of that, basically, when I was in hospital.
Yeah, I mean, safeguarding is a big one, but how you respond to safeguarding, how you manage safeguarding is very, very different across organisations. And, you know, it's like risk. You know, you can't remove risk. You can be risk averse, but you can't remove risk. You can manage risk. You can plan for risk. You can put a risk management plan in place. But, you know, safeguarding, it's one of those things. It's about the individual and whether or not there's harm to self or other. And if there is a high significance of harm to self or other, then there is a safeguarding. But, you know, we will talk that through with people, rather than just undertaking an action.
Sharon, about the harm being caused by psychiatric, mad in the UK, mad in America is saying, there's a big harm, the use of psychiatric drugs on people. It's the biggest cause of, basically, one of the biggest causes of death in society, basically, psychiatric drugs.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to be part of Mad Pride back in the day, bed pushers
I
and
was as well. I
picnics.
was part of Mad Pride, yeah.
Yeah, we've probably come across one another, Colin, in madness circles.
I'm a lead advocate for BAME support in my trust and would be interested in getting some professional training on this. I am from a nursing and dental background. I don't know if you can help with that.
Happy to do that. We've got some. We're not doing it at the moment because of COVID, but we used to guest lecture at Bradford and Leeds University on occasion, and we used to work with the mental health nurse second year programme and the mental health social worker second year programme. So we've actually got some training. If people want to get in touch with us, we'd be happy to look at how we do that.
Next question, do you support people with self-advocacy skills? Do you have any tips if you do? We are about to embark with a self-advocacy service following some successful funding bids.
Fabulous, that is delightful to hear. Yeah, self-advocacy is very, very much where our heart is. Everyone and anyone can be an advocate. And teaching somebody how to self-advocate is a huge thing. We've got a ton of stuff on self-advocacy, have we not, Tracy?
We have.
We have. But yeah, self-advocacy is some of the best advocacy I've done. You know, I've had conversations with people about a meeting that they're about to go into with the doctor or the psychiatrist, and help them to work out what it is that they want and what it is they want to say and how they want to say it and in what order and when they want to say it. And I've kind of gone, right, so do you want me to come to the meeting with you? Oh, no, I'm fine. I know what I want now. It's self-advocacy is the best form of advocacy. And, you know, it's something that's very, very close to our hearts as a service user-led organisation also, because we've spent a lot of time preparing ourselves and working on our own experiences. And you know, yeah, we've got some stuff that we'd be happy to share there.
That's it.
That's it.
Oh, Janine says thank you.
You're very, very welcome. It was an absolute pleasure to be able to do that.
Okay.
Well, Kate, I don't know if you want to come back in and add anything for sort of like finishing off, or if anyone else has got.
I think just to echo everybody's heartfelt thanks. It's been really refreshing, and I think it's probably galvanised people. And you're also speaking to an international audience.
Ooh.
Yeah, we have colleagues from Australia.
Wow.
Emma, I didn't know whether you wanted to come in, because I know you've been instrumental in setting up your mental health advocacy service in Australia. And is peer advocacy featured? Is this kind of, it'd be great to get like an international perspective. I know I've just put you on the spot. You're probably in your pajamas.
I'm not in my pajamas, but it is the end of the day.
Nice to see you.
I'll be really honest. It's one thing that is not at the forefront here, and it is something that is on my wish list over the next couple of years. And I know it's an area that we need to improve on greatly. So I was actually thinking that I probably will just get in touch with Sharon at a later date and Tracy and have some further discussions, because it is an area that we do need to build on over here.
Nice. So yeah. And in the UK too, it's, you know, it's got it's brilliant to hear Sharon talk about the history, because it's gone through a heartbeat rhythm, hasn't it? Yeah. I'm just thinking, Sharon, do you maybe want to pop your website or email in the chat box, just in case people, I think there's a lot of interest in me.
It's Colin.
Yeah, Colin.
Are people aware of Peter Beresford, that Shaping Our Lives?
Yeah.
You know Peter Beresford? Yeah. I know Peter very, very well. And I basically, Peter basically is saying basically that peer advocacy and wellness and recovery basically is disappearing.
Yeah, Colin, you might know us more as not Vital, but BAMHAG, Bradford and Airedale Mental Health Advocacy Group. Yeah. We changed and rebranded a couple of years ago, and sort of really revisited why we as an organisation originally came into being. And we recognise that as much now as then that we're really needed. and partly because people who don't have a statutory right to advocacy, with some very complex scenarios that they're dealing with and working through, still need support.
Sharon, do you see wellness and recovery and peer advocacy mirroring together?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I think, you know, that self-advocacy, wellness, recovery, being able to self-care, they're hugely in the same ball.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you again so much, Sharon and Tracy.
Pleasure.
Honestly, really, really grateful for your contributions and sharing your experiences and expertise. Really grateful.
Just quickly to say, can I just say one thing? There's a lot of interest coming through for self-advocacy. So just anybody, just get in touch with us via the website. We're happy to help.
Yeah, I mean, we could even do a special self-advocacy presentation on Zoom or something like that.
Yeah.